I'm pleased to introduce to you Pat Deegan, who is really one of the great figures of our movement, going back. Pat does something that very few people do. She's very pragmatic. All of us get worked up, we get angry, we want to advocate, we want to be about love and outrage, but Pat takes these values and principles and makes strategic interventions at key places where it really has an impact on people. The first way I saw that was, a lot of people were buried in state hospital grounds with no tombstones, right? You know that? You can imagine. Pat was part of a cemetery project and saw that they got tombstones with their names on them. Can we hear that? Then she winds up on audio tape, sort of taping what it's like to hear voices. And she gives it to the police so they understand how not to escalate people and how to better understand what's happening. Then she creates, Pat, I'm forgetting the name of the thing you did with, shared decision making. And that helps people go in to see the doctor and have the doctor and the person ready. Such a critical moment, right? To really get it right. And now, all over the world, people are taking her certification program in personal medicine to better manage their health. So she turns her love and outrage into action. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Pat Deegan. I believe every word of it. Thank you, Pat. Love you. Love you too.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for a warm welcome, Harvey. I always feel like the Alliance, formerly NIAPS, is sort of like my extended family, so it's a joy to be here. And let me just jump right in. How do you roar? This is a reflection on human dignity in troubled times. And let me begin by thanking you for what you do and to remind us that each and every one of us in this room today, we are the ones we've been waiting for. Oh, yes, we are. We're the ones we've been waiting for. The poet June Jordan wrote those words to commemorate the 1956 March on Apartheid in South Africa, where 40,000 women and children roared their resistance to oppression. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Take a look around the room today. Let's be emboldened by June Jordan's words. We, right here in this room, we're the ones that we've been waiting for. And despite the troubles and the uncertainty, in this room today we have fierce, mad women and mad men and mad genderqueer folks and mad allies, and we are armed with hope. In hope, we can look into the face of the world's injustice, into the face of the world's hurt. And rather than fainting and falling over into despair, we have a vision, and it is a prophetic vision of what is possible. And I'm not talking about some kind of flighty, happy face optimism that says, don't worry, just be happy, right? I'm talking about authentic hope. Authentic hope. In a time of unprecedented uncertainty and fear, we organize around the promise of what is possible. And it is possible to create a better world for everyone. I'm grateful that you're here today. And to be sure, I do not know all of the answers, but I also don't even have a crystal ball where I can guide us into our future, but I am willing today to share what I know and what I'm learning on this journey. When the election results came in, I felt shocked and numbed and filled with disbelief. I felt physically sick. And in the early days, I found myself wondering, where are all the grown-ups? Who's in charge here? Well, immediately after the administration was in place, funding began to be discontinued And for me, that's when a deeper kind of fear set in. Almost reflexively, I began to move into self-protection. And I became focused on me and mine, and wondering if it was time to retire or to take my savings and stuff them into a mattress for safekeeping. And then there were those Zoom calls at work. And it seemed to me that everyone was wide-eyed, like deer in headlights. And a shallow smile was on our otherwise blank faces. And nobody was really talking at work about it. Everyone was sort of code talking, and during work there was very little open discussion about resistance. We were more silent, hoping not to attract too much attention, trying not to be singled out. And then side by side with my fear was a feeling of haughty superiority. I thought those who voted were ignorant people. I engaged in private, intense othering. They're never going to get away with this, I reasoned. But then the great universities began to kneel in order to survive the funding cuts. And if it came to it, I found myself wondering, would I also kneel and bend the work of my small but mighty company to the agenda of the state? This phase was followed by vacillation between anger and my fear. I started doom scrolling. I spent too much time anxiously studying the news. Anxious surveillance coupled with kind of this haughty and arrogant amusement with all of the millions of memes, jokes, art, and humor that social media algorithms began flooding my feeds with. And that's when I began to realize that I was being poisoned by the very same hate I was repelled by. Hating the opposition and imagining myself superior to them definitely wasn't working for me. So once I understood this, I began to retreat. And I started getting some distance from it all by isolating and limiting my exposure to the news of the day. And I actually deleted most of the news apps from my phone, and I only read headlines. And I stopped living in a social media echo chamber where all I was hearing was the very same people who sounded just like me, right? And I want to acknowledge that my ability to retreat and reorient was part of my privilege as a white woman. I did not have to be vigilant about ICE coming for me, at least yet. In my experience, retreat and regrouping wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It helped me shake the fear and the paralysis that goes with fear. It helped me get reoriented. Concretely, my partner Deborah and I began volunteering at our local food pantry. I expanded my work with folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities in my community as our government was celebrating Independence Day by voting to slash SSI, SNAP, and other entitlements which allow folks with disabilities to be independent. And as simple as it sounds, I also began to focus on small acts of kindness and goodness. For instance, I was out walking my pups and I saw a man driving one of those giant Ford pickup trucks. And he pulled over, and he got out of the cab to gently help a turtle safely across the road. Deborah told me when she returned that there was a sheriff's car parked out in front of the food pantry where she was volunteering. And she had been trained in how to respond if ICE showed up. The sheriff stepped out of the car, and he was not carrying a taser. He was carrying donations that the sheriff's department had raised to keep the food pantry open. There's hope in that. Every single act of care, every refusal to normalize cruelty, every time we can find it in ourselves to be generous and to share, we are making a different kind of future. Yeah. We are the ones we've been waiting for, and the future is not written yet. That's where the hope lives. Kindness matters, and there's still so much good in this world, and let's cultivate the good. Focusing on goodness helped me reconnect with my power, my calling, my vocation. My power is my purpose, and no government administration can keep me from my calling. Okay? I have this thing within me that I call my roar. It's that passion that the Reverend Dr. King spoke of when he said, we all have within and amongst us an indefatigable fire that no hose can extinguish. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Here's a very brief rendition of how I discovered my roar. I was, as some of you know, a senior in high school, and I began to experience what got eventually diagnosed as a first episode of psychosis. Like most seniors in high school, I had big plans for my future. I had a sense of wanting to go somewhere with my life, to become a women's athletic coach and to get paid for having a good time playing sports. That was the big idea. And so I began to struggle during basketball practice during the winter break, and began to hear voices that folks couldn't hear, and they were quite frightening and disorienting. I found I had trouble coordinating my movements with my teammates. I lost all kind of sense of where I was kind of in space and was quite distracted. I was told to kind of go home by my coach, and maybe it was a bad night's sleep or something, but in any case, and I know a lot of you know what I'm talking about, this was the first really acute onset of what later got called schizophrenia. Eventually, I was hospitalized, and once in the hospital, I was told, Miss Deegan, you have a disease called schizophrenia, and just like a schizophrenic, just like a diabetic will have to take insulin for the rest of their lives, you're going to have to take high-dose antipsychotic meds for the rest of your life. I was also advised to take my meds, and did we mention take your meds? And at discharge, I was also advised to avoid stress. Yeah. How are we doing with that? Right. So then, needless to say, those marching instructions didn't exactly work out too well for me. And I found myself returning to the hospital a number of times after that. And at one of my return visits, I was meeting with my psychiatrist, and he was once again telling me the litany of needing to gain insight into how ill I was, of needing to take my medication consistently, and to lower the stress in my life. And I remember hearing it at that time, and I was sitting across the room from him, and something happened. I call it an ember of what was left of my dignity began to stir. It was as likely this, I had been pretty crushed down, and yet this thing, I could feel it come up from my gut. And inside myself, I knew better than to speak up too much in the appointment, but inside myself, very quietly, something is going, you're wrong. You're wrong about me. You're wrong. And I remember stepping outside his office into a hallway, and this thought came to me. And the thought was as large and as beautiful and as wondrous as what get called delusions come to us, right? And the thought was, I'm going to become Dr. Deegan, and I am going to change the mental health system so that no one ever gets hurt in it again. This was my roar, right? And it awoke in me. And it was like having this incredibly powerful response in the face of indignity. I'm a person. I am not a schizophrenic. I never have been, I never will be. I'm a person, not an illness. And looking back, I'm always careful to say it's not like suddenly, this miraculous turning point and the angels came down from heaven and said, go do this. No, I went right back to the couch smoking the cigarettes and the whole thing, but something had lit on fire, okay? And I call it my roar. So let's look for a minute at the anatomy of a roar. And I get this idea in part from a community organizer. He was Barack Obama's organizer, Marshall Gantz. And what I've learned about that moment, because I think about it a lot, is that when our dignity is violated, when our dignity is violated, it reveals a gap between what is and what should be. When our dignity is violated, it reveals a vision of what must happen to close that gap. When our dignity is violated, it reveals a vision. For me, it was that help shouldn't hurt. And so if I show you the anatomy of my roar, what is? You are a schizophrenic, Miss Deegan, and you're going to be sick and have to take meds for the rest of your life. That's what is. But something awoke in me, and I got a glimpse of what could be. What I realized is, look, they took away my hope for a better life, but help should not hurt. It should not hurt. That's the vision I had, and that's why I'm going to become Dr. Deegan and change the mental health system so no one ever gets hurt in it again. The anatomy of a roar, the opening, the vision of the gap between what is and what should be. And then this extraordinary sense of, and I'm going to be part of closing that gap, right? So, as Harvey mentioned, how I roar, like not all of us roar in exactly the same way, and I do believe that each and every one of us has a unique roar that reflects our unique gifts. And that many of you in this room today are gifted at peer support. But interestingly, I'm not really very good at it. I'm not steady enough as a person to be able to be there for others. I can hardly get my own ass through the day some days, right? You know what I'm saying? So I'm not great at peer support, right? And many of you are gifted at organizing, but I kind of suck at it, right? I'm not that good at organizing and running groups and organizing protests and networking with people. To be honest with you, I'm much more of a monk than that. And I know that many of you today are fantastic at policy. God love you. I'm not good at policy. I'm not good at politics or governments or bureaucracies, business or administration, to name a few. But what I am good at is what I call disruptive innovation. I'm not interested in changing the system, not at all. I once was studying with a spiritual advisor who told me that we spend a lot of time being very, very active changing things, and he claimed that all we really do with that sort of rushed change is rearrange the chairs on the deck of the Titanic and therefore achieve a better view going down, right? I'm interested in progress. I want to disrupt and innovate all at the same time, and I call this method the Trojan horse method. See, early in my work, I used to lecture a lot to people about the values and the principles of recovery and all of that good stuff and peer support and all that. But what I learned is that people can get deeply inspired during a talk, but when they return to the same environments in behavioral health and in work, very often what happens is a kind of undertow takes them back under until before you know it, they end up working in the same fashions. And what I concluded from that insight was that what people need are tools, concrete tools that exemplify the principles and practices and values of the changes and progress we're trying to make. And that in the act of using these tools, when they're carefully engineered and embedded right within the care pathway, not an extra something I have to do, but right there in the regular flow of work, all of a sudden you begin to see that there's a transfer from learning into practice. Transfer from what we're learning into practice by using the tools. And that, my friends, is what I'm good at. I use the image of the Trojan horse because, of course, we all know the story, and the Trojan horse was brought into town, and there are all these little soldiers hiding in it. And people thought it was this wonderful gift, which it was, but inside there were all these little mischievous soldiers who came out and did their deeds, right? And that's how I think of some of the tools that I've discovered. And so in my work, this is how I roar, through disruptive innovations. So the mission of my small company is to safeguard human dignity by bringing individual choice and voice to the very center of the clinical care team. and that we do this, as Harvey mentioned, in a wide variety of ways, everything from creating software that's used in psychiatric medication clinics with peer support, etc. So the question becomes, my friends, how do you roar? What is your angry indignation? What's the gap that you see? I don't necessarily say you see it, right? What's your vision of how to close the gap between what is and what should be? And how does your vision call you to lead? And how does your roar enrich my roar, and my roar enrich our collective roar? How does that happen, right? That's the question, right? So, I want to share that many of us have a proud history, a proud heritage of people who have been diagnosed or labeled as mad people. We have a rich heritage of resisting indignity. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about that rich heritage, talking about our people and how they can lead us during these times, and to think about our vocation, about our roar, right? So what I want to offer is that sometimes, I've been busy collecting our collective story for many decades now, since the 1990s, and in my exploration, I wanted to know, what is our story as a people before, how was it written? Where is our story, right? How was it written? How did people leave a mark or a testament to their story? What is it? Where is it? Not the one that's filtered through psychiatry, or not the story as it's filtered through history books, but our story and our words. So I went looking. And what I found in my explorations is that for as long as there've been madhouses and lunatic asylums and mental hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, there have been individual acts of resistance, right? So this is an engraving that was done in 1710. And we see an inmate in a cell at the Bethlehem Asylum in the United Kingdom. This is the 1700s, right? And he is hurling the contents of his chamber pot into the window. If you look carefully, you can see that the public has gathered to gawk and stare and ridicule the inmates. And this was a very common practice, to invite the public to view the lunatics, and people paid 1 shilling for admittance on a Sunday afternoon. So this practice, my friends, was so common, both abroad and in the US, that it was called asylum tourism. And you could get a pamphlet when you came to a new city in order to do your tourism. In fact, there was one right in New York City, if you can believe it. So anyway, from the perspective of human dignity, this individual act of resistance that we see here, right, is really an assertion of human dignity in the face of indignity. And I would assert that it's not a crazy thing to resist humiliation. So in my studies, I learned that sometimes our people roar in very quiet ways. So for instance, here in this seclusion room in New Zealand, Vivian carved her name. And this, my friends, was an act of defiance, of leaving a mark, a name, a testament to her personhood, to the dignity of Vivian, who suffered alone. And this person in a seclusion room in New Hampshire, and this seclusion room in Massachusetts. Also, individual acts of resistance, right? Sometimes these very quiet forms of resistance take place right under the watchful eye, right, of the attendants. So for instance, here's a display from the Glore Psychiatric Museum in St. Joseph State Hospital in Missouri. The display contains a white state hospital sheet on which a black woman diagnosed with chronic schizophrenia and institutionalized for 30 years until her death had embroidered words. And this woman embroidered hospital sheet after hospital sheet. And the sign next to the display explained that the embroidered words were illustrative of schizophrenic thinking. So let's take a look. Okay? To have and to hold and to love. Wait for me. Are you coming? I love you. Christmas. I'm lonely. And this message, right? Yeah. Where the clinical gaze sees signs of schizophrenic thinking, we see a woman abandoned in a mental institution, struggling with deep emotions and questions. I'm lonely, and are you coming? Perhaps that's why we've historically called them shrinks, to be able to see a woman as a disease and to call her expression of feeling schizophrenia, to shrink the context of her life, to shrink the meaning of her pain, and to shrink the significance of her life experience. Historically, we have resisted the effort to shrink our humanity into the disease categories. And through our resistance, even our quiet individual acts of individual resistance, we have a new story to tell. You can see it in her eyes. You can feel her staring back into the indignity and glaring. I am a person, not an illness. And I tell you, there's power in that. How do you roar? What is your roar? What is your outrage and your angry indignation? What are your words? And how does your roar embolden you to lead and to close the gap between what is and what should be? Because, guys, we are the ones that we have been waiting for. In my explorations, I also found that personal acts of kindness between and among our people has happened over centuries, right? Personal acts of kindness towards one another are acts of resistance because they defy the power of unjust systems, right, to dehumanize us. Through compassion, we resist becoming a case that needs to be managed, and instead, we assert our humanity and our dignity. This form of resistance, I think, is a very natural form and response to oppression. So watch with me for a second. I'm going to show you a short film clip, and it comes from an extraordinary film that was done in the 70s called Hurry Tomorrow, a film by Richard Cohen and Kevin Rafferty. If you have a chance, you can find it online and check it out. But the one thing that I do want to point out to you is that during this very, very short little piece, you're going to notice that there's this person playing billiards, and that's the nurse. And then you're going to notice these two folks, and they are the patients. So Hurry Tomorrow, let's just watch this form of kindness, acts of kindness as resistance to indignity.
You stay there. You just stay where you are. Okay, just stay where you are, all right? If you want to go to sleep? Well, you can't have the medication. It fucks us all up. But just sit there and relax. It's all right. You okay? Are you all right? Look, tell me if you're okay. Well, you want a handshake? Yeah, there you go. Now stay there. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. Relax. Just relax. Relax. Yeah, lay your head back and go to sleep. Go ahead. Don't get up now. You stay there. I hope he knows enough to stay where I put him. I don't know. Some people just don't learn not to teach enough. Is there anything you can do for him? He passes out on that shit?
Tasting beer. Miller High Life. American quality beer. 1855.
Let me have that bench for this guy, will you? Hey, let me have that bench for this guy, will you? Get up, man. He needs the whole bench. Here. Get out. Get comfortable. Put your feet through there. That's it. Now lay down and relax and go to sleep, okay? Just stay there. It's all right. I ain't going nowhere. I'll be right here. Just stay there, will you? Just relax. Relax. Okay? I close your eyes and try to get some sleep. You'll be all right when you wake up. Now stay there. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here. Just stay there and go to sleep if you can, okay? Is he sleeping again? Nah, he's fucked up on that medication. That's all.
Individual acts of kindness, they're happening all the time, in and among and between us. Another way that our people have roared is to create alternatives to the mental health system. I'm wondering, is this how perhaps you roar? Do you see a gap between what's offered in public mental health and what should be offered to support people through mental health challenges? What's your vision of how to close that gap? What is your vision of what's needed, and how does your roar call you to lead by creating alternatives, perhaps, to the system? Well, Miss Jenny Fulgham's roar sure led her to that conclusion, and let's see what Miss Jenny did. Back in 2003, my friend and colleague Vanessa Jackson and I were working on a project, to collect untold stories, including the untold stories from racially segregated institution survivors. And we met this woman that you see here, Miss Jenny Fulgham. And at the time, she was an 81-year-old living in a small town in Zuni, Virginia. And way back in 1947, she was admitted to the racially segregated Central Hospital in Petersburg, Virginia. And she was diagnosed at that time with paranoid schizophrenia. And after discharge, Miss Jenny went on to work for the phone company for 20 years up here in New York City. And in many ways, her life resembled the lives of other people, except she never forgot her experience of being in the state hospital. She never forgot the people she left behind in that institution. So, in 1961, she and another former patient got a van and began to visit and do what she called encourage patients at New York City's mental institutions. No government funding, no government grants. She just did it because it called to her. She saw a gap between what is and what should be, and she had a vision of how to close that gap. And so she began to visit folks in New York City and to encourage them. But then in 1978, Miss Jenny returned to her rural hometown and established the Zuni Federation for Mental Health. And Miss Jenny single-handedly cleared and leveled 3 acres of land with nothing but a shovel and a wheelbarrow. And on her land, oh boy, this gal roars, huh? On her land, she creates the Garden of Hope retreat, where former patients are welcome to spend time, to relax, and to get in touch with nature at no cost to them. I like Miss Jenny. She embodies the true spirit of peer support, which is love freely given. And inspired by Miss Jenny, let's just all really just help other folks plant gardens of hope in their hearts, because that's what really authentic peer support is about. And of course, Miss Jenny was not the first or the only giant upon whose shoulders we're standing today. There's the story of John Percival from the United Kingdom. And after serving in the military, he was placed in an asylum, and he ended up spending the better part of 8 months in restraints similar to the ones that you see pictured here. And when he came out of the asylum, when he was finally discharged, he published 2 books describing his passage through madness and the horrors of the treatment that he received. And here's what he wrote. I reflected on how many were in the same predicament as myself. And I said, who shall speak for them if I do not? Who shall plead for them if I do not? How can I betray them, and myself too, by subscribing to the subtle villainy, the cruelty, the tyranny of the doctors of the asylum? Can you hear the roar? I can hear that roar. He's feeling it, right? So again, the anatomy of a roar, right? What is? I was abused and stripped of my rights in the asylum, opening a vision of what should be. I am a person with rights, and treatment should not be torture. So in addition to the 2 books with his expose, he goes on and helps found the alleged Lunatics Friends Society. Yes, in 1845, and lasted nearly 20 years, right? And had up to 60 members, both ex-inmates and their allies. This poster that you see here was used to do some rabble-rousing and bring crowds of folks together. And in addition to getting into Parliament and making changes to the lunacy laws, what I also love is that they also did direct peer support, helping people access their mail, helping people smuggle mail out of the asylums, bringing decent food in for people, etc. Okay, so this is powerful roar. And I like to remind us that in a time where there is a considerable drift in peer support happening in many settings across the United States, that we need to always embrace that our roots as peer supporters lies at this intersection, represented by Miss Jenny and Percival, at the intersection of love and outrage. That's where we live, love and outrage. Now, briefly, speaking of outrage, I got to introduce you to Elizabeth Packard. Oh, she was something else. Elizabeth came out in the 1800s and published a book about her involuntary incarceration in Illinois. And so her book was called Modern Persecution or Insane Asylums Unveiled. And again, it tells the story of her involuntary incarceration at a state hospital. And here's a photograph of Elizabeth with her husband, and he was a Presbyterian minister. And in her first-person account, Elizabeth Packard tells the story of being committed to the asylum because she did not hold the same religious beliefs as her husband. Watch out, ladies, right? She says, and get the wit here, she says, had I lived in the 16th century instead of the 19th, my husband would have used the laws of that day to punish me as a heretic. In other words, instead of calling me by the obsolete title of heretic, he modernizes his phrase by substituting insanity instead of heresy as the crime for which I am now sentenced to endless imprisonment in one of our modern inquisitions, right? Brilliant. Then Elizabeth does the most outrageous thing. We're talking about Victorian times, right? She forces proper Victorian men, because she's going on a sit-down strike, and she is not going to help them get her to the asylum, right? So they have to manhandle the lady onto the train. And then in her book, she depicts a total of 11 coaches whizzing up to the Illinois Insane Asylum to emphasize the amount of business that they were doing. And then she does it again. She gets into the asylum and goes on another sit-down strike, okay, and forces the proper gentlemen and attendants to take her to her room. And she, of course, depicts the horrors of what she endured and so many others endured. And then when she got out, not only does she write this extraordinary first-person account, but she is judged by a jury as not insane, and then proceeds to petition legislatures in 31 states. 31 states to change the status of woman with regard to commitment laws. And this resulted in the passage of the Packard laws to protect women from wrongful commitment to asylums by relatives. Friends, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And what I want to know is that when we write our stories, when we tell our truth, okay, we do get a reaction. This is the president, former president of the American Psychiatric Association, Isaac Ray. And I'd like to have you hear how he reacts to this truth-telling. All right, so he publishes, and he says, the most prolific source of this distrust of hospitals for the insane is undoubtedly the communications of patients themselves. He goes on to discredit ex-patient narratives by saying that the insane are liars by nature. We are liars by nature, and that we have a total disregard for veracity, okay? So you see the power of telling our truth to power, right? So historically, humor, maybe maybe you're a person, that's a writer, that's an artist, that's a satirist, that is a musician, that's a dancer, right? Our people have always used the arts and humor as a form of resistance. And I think to keep our sense of humor is a key to our resilience, right? And that we can assert our humanity sometimes just by laughing, right? Here's a favorite for me. We've got a speaker at the American Psychiatric Association saying, and so in the decade of the 90s, our most severe challenge will be to stop people from helping themselves, right? Of course, a cartoon that's lampooning side effects. So besides that twitch in your left eye, do you have any side effects? Here's another cartoon from old Madness Network News that offers a deft critique of focusing on individuals in therapy to the exclusion of focusing on broader systemic injustices. The analyst says, every time you think of the revolution, I want you to talk about your father. There you go. And another one that's quite wonderful. Here's your community mental health team, circa 1900. And we might even call it assisted outpatient treatment. And these are some of my very favorite. These are from Mouth magazine. My friend Lucy Gwynn was a publisher on it. And so this is depicting gangs of do-gooders who are roaming the streets, performing interventions. And they say, help. You need our help. And I think what's great about it is that it really underscores the fact that sometimes in order, that there is a huge business money-making element to what goes on in private and public behavioral health, and that sometimes the professionals need us too. So Lucy Gwynn is really lampooning that at this, as a nurse runs up and says, sir, you seem stressed, sir. Let us help. And he says, yeah, help? Yes, I'd like some. And of course, it's totally missing the idea that help, to be helpful, has to be co-created. If we impose help on people who don't have a say in co-creating that help, then get what? Help becomes toxic and very often doesn't work out that way, right? So a couple of final thoughts. How do you roar? And one thing I think about is organized resistance and the importance of civil disobedience in our movement, right? So some of us, I think, have beautiful talents, skills, vocations, gifts for organizing. And so I'm going to introduce to you Celia Brown, who many of you know and have heard of, right? Celia. And Celia and I, before she passed, had the opportunity to agree on and work on what I call an I roar card. The idea being that by putting this card together, Celia could, in a very concise way, inspire future generations to think about their roar and how they roar. So here's the roar. Here are the words to Celia's roar that she shared with me. She said, I lived in this mental health residential program, and I had no choices, really, only the choices of what the program wanted me to do. And then I met leaders in our movement at a conference, and I learned everybody has a right to choice. Forced drugging, forced ECT, forced treatment in the community of the hospital, that's just wrong. Learning I had a choice was the turning point for me. So I organized some of the residents in the programs, and we had meetings so we would have a voice. And of course, later on, the staff stopped that from happening. So then we met outside of the program and called our meeting the Inter-Expressive Support Group. Don't you just love it? Don't you just love it? So we got shut down here, but she's going to open shop outside the residential program that she was also a client in at the time, right? Celia's roar, that's where her power. And so Celia's roar began with the smaller organic effort to organize her peers, right? And to talk with one another in an inter-expressive support group. On the back of the card, if I think about Celia's roar first, I think about what is forced drugging, ECT, forced treatment, what should be. Everybody has a choice. I'm going to organize groups where we can explore our voice and our choice. On the back of the card, we get to see what else Celia has done. If you're interested in downloading a free copy, you can just scan the QR code, and it's over on my website for free. But Celia, from these very humble beginnings of supporting fellow residents, fellow clients in a residential program in a group home, Celia helped to organize many, many more larger and larger groups. As a longtime member of advocacy, rights and protection, board president of Mind Freedom International, the United Nations International Convention for Human Rights. I mean, these are just a few. Founder, co-founder of Surviving Race. I mean, this lady could roar, right? So again, if you're interested in being able to download the card and share it with people who are up and coming, please do. And the bottom line is, of course, that even to this day, we still have way too many reasons to organize and to take it to the streets because, friends, we are the ones that we have been waiting for. And a final note on civil disobedience. When I think about how people have roared over the centuries, let's remember the times when psychiatric survivors have actually used civil disobedience. And so what we have here is 1976, the Network Against Psychiatric Assault, 1976, organizing and taking over Governor Brown's office, demanding an end to shock treatment and involuntary treatment. We also have in 1980, protesting, forming a human link across the main entrance of the American Psychiatric Association. And Leonard Roy Frank, who's up here. Now, the wind blew those letters down. Stop it. Oh, you must be paranoid. I mean, that's, right? No, the wind blew that down. Anyway, I guess according to Leonard Roy Frank's testimony, that 5 or 6 psychiatrists did try to enter through the human link, but were non-violently persuaded to use the other doors. But they made their statement, right, and it's important. And just one final thing that I want to put out there is I want to make some noise with you. I want to raise up our people. So some of you got rattles, okay? And there you go. Let's do this together, okay, guys? I want you to raise up your... I'll get there.
We are the ones, we are the ones,
We've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones,
we've been waiting.
Yeah, come on.
We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting.
Yeah.
We are the ones, we've been waiting.
Come on.
We are the ones, we've been waiting.
Yeah.
We are the
Yeah.
ones, we've been waiting. We are
Yeah.
the ones, we've been waiting.
Yes. All right.
So we have 15 minutes for you to talk to Pat. So raise your hands, and I don't think we have mics, do we, folks? Alliance team? All right, speak loud.
No, I just wanted to thank you so much. I remember being in a mental hospital, and I didn't even know I felt this way, but I did remember my mother being dragged off, saying, "I don't want to feel that shock again," you know. So I as a kid, right? So now they had me, and I'm standing there, and I'm saying, "Medicine is sacred. This is blasphemy against medicine," and they don't like it. They like really didn't like it because religious, how to have. And like for me, that was just like a reigning principle. It's so clear to me that this was a moral, philosophical, that they were sinning against medicine, and I knew it, And so yeah, I just wanted to say thanks.
Hi. Hi, Ariella Keynote, crisis rescue. Said that the help shouldn't hurt, and yeah, I'm noticing something. It's common for people to come to a respite to get over a hospitalization on the mental ward. It's common for people to come to our respite because the homeless shelter they're in is causing the crisis. If the help did not hurt to get, we are but 8 beds. We would have a lot less of a wait list if the help did not hurt to get like this. Thank you.
Lord, I'm loud. I don't need that. I'm so loud. Yeah, I promise. And I'm right here. I just have one simple question. When you get worried and the anxiety kicks and you don't know what you're gonna do next, and that fear of the unknown, how do you handle that? How do you overcome that? How do you get past that anxiety of I don't know what's gonna happen next, and I'm scared and I can't feel my legs? Yeah. So my question to Pat was, how does she handle the anxiety and not knowing what's happening next? In those moments of oh my God, my legs are numb and I'm freaking out. I just asked her how she overcomes that and how she handles those moments of feeling scared and what to do.
Yep. So it's a great question, and I think it's one that everybody could contribute to. But I would say that uncertainty is terrifying, and especially when we're already operating kind of from the baseline of struggling with this fear. And I mentioned some of the things that I do. I try to focus on simple, good things, like that guy helping the turtle across the street, and remembering there's goodness in this world, and that I can choose that because there's suffering. It's also important for me to focus on good things too. So feeding myself with some of the good stuff, taking the time to notice it and relish it and hold it, and then being willing, I think, I exercise my brains out and I blare my music when I sing it. I'm singing it while I'm working out all alone in my little room up there, but I do, and that is a huge help. I think that talking with people I trust and care about, being here today really helps, and I think that just, we don't know the future anyway, we just don't, but that I am determined to be part of making the future I want to see, and that's where I'm putting my energy and my focus. And I find it hugely helpful to keep it local. Right now, just really acting local. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Donna, and I love your empowering share that you just gave. About a month ago, I was hospitalized at a hospital, and I never wanted to go to get help, but I happened to be in the right place at the right time when I wanted to end my life. And thank God there was somebody present in the meeting and said that he was somebody that had to call for help. So I'm like, forget it. I'm not going to go and do what I was going to do. I just need to get help. And so I ended up at an ER, and it was a horrible place to have to sit for hours on end. All the noises and people rushing to and from rooms, and it was just not where I wanted to be, but I knew I needed to stay there to get help. And when I did get to the psych unit, I had somebody sitting outside my room to watch me, and I didn't feel like I needed that, but I did need it. And then they put me on medication, and it made me feel some type of way, and my mom was always against medication. So, and because I have a drug and alcoholic problem in recovery, I didn't want to take the medication. But I know that now it's something that I need so I don't end up locked up or dead somewhere. It's just, it stinks to have an addiction. And one addiction became another addiction. And I just hope that I can help somebody in recovery because it's so real. This disease wants me dead. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing. Glad you're with us.
Thank you, Ray. Ray Cornell. Hey.
No, I just really, like I said earlier, well, I just wanted to tell her that I have been following her wisdom for a lot of years, and I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate what you shared today. And I wanted to give you something.
Oh, thank you.
It's a Kishwabi that says kindness is magic, but
Kindness is magic. Kindness is magic. Thank you so much. Beautiful.
We only have room for one more.
Pat and Casper, so nice to meet you at Fountain House. And I love how you're getting videos from many different stories because each of us has a different story. And would you consider yourself a giant? I'd like to rephrase that. I think the giants are people who just dared. And don't you think everybody in this room could be people who really dared? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I really mean it. We're the ones we've been waiting for, and it ain't coming over the hill like the cavalry. We're it, and we are giants, and we have giant hearts and lots of compassion and a vision. Stay in touch with your roar, though. That's the rocket fuel.
Thank you very much. I was watching a video yesterday on PBS regarding the state of the country with the president about the notion of kneeling. So how do we know, when do we know it's enough that we roar? Prison or arrest by the police, or I don't even know where to draw a limits of my own roaring in advocacy and right for mental health treatment and dignity. How do we know? We don't want to end in prison, right?
Well, some of us may, for real. And it's a very important question, but I think it's a matter of discerning that gift within each of us. So discerning your gift, how do you roar? It won't be the way I roar, okay? And that by discovering what is that gap you see between what is and what should be, and what is your vision of how to close it, that's how we're called to lead. So not all of us will go to prison, but that all of us together, I think, have a collective roar, have a collective impact, and that's the ticket, I think, is the power between us and among us. Yeah. So, we have a couple of minutes to maybe get your picture taken with Pat. Sorry, Pat.
So we're gonna end the workshop here. Poor Pat is gonna come down here and be available for photos. I'll do it with her if you want.